Hello there, I'm Lloyd Evans. Welcome to The Bunker. And in this video, I must start with a bombshell. As you may have surmised from the title of this video, I have started studying with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka the Mormons. I don't really know where to begin. So basically, let me back up. I've started to get more engaged with the local expat scene here in Croatia. And one thing that became very quickly apparent when I started doing this was that there was a Mormon presence. I know Mormons, they don't like me to use that word, but just for the sake of ease, I'm just going to use the word Mormon. And I mean no disrespect. So I quickly noticed that there was a Mormon presence in the expat Facebook groups that I was joining and participating in. And one of the things that I noticed that they were doing was arranging football on a weekly basis. And when I say football, for you Americans, I don't mean American football. I don't mean with all the padding and the helmet. I mean actual football, or as you would put it, soccer. So they were arranging soccer on Friday evenings. And this was quite appealing to me because with the pandemic and everything, it's been at least a couple of years since I've last actually played football, which happens to be my favorite sport, not just to watch, but to play as well. And I kind of saw an opportunity here to have a game of football, but I also figured I could maybe kill two birds with one stone and observe the way LDS missionaries recruit, observe their strategies and what it's like to study with them. So I reached out to them, and I'm going to obviously be very careful in this video because I don't want to discuss any individuals or any identifying information about individuals without their consent. I'm quite big on that. So I'm going to change the names of the missionaries to Betty and Harriet. So it was two female missionaries. And it was Betty that I reached out to. Again, not the real name, but you get the gist. And I'm just going to read through some of my Facebook exchange. Hi, Betty. Thanks for your post. I can't make it to the worship, but I'd be interested to learn more about the LDS Church sometime. So Betty had posted inviting people in, I think, the expats group to an LDS worship event. Of course, if you have time, we can have a call with you and explain some of our basic beliefs. To which I replied, I'll see when I'm free. Do you also arrange football? I love football. I knew that they do arrange football. I was just trying to work that in quite quickly. Betty said, American football or soccer? Sorry, I'm from America. So I replied, soccer? Betty said, actually, we have a soccer night every Friday now in a park right above centre if you're interested in coming. So thus ensued an exchange, and what ended up happening was that a couple of days ago I finally met with Betty and Harriet, her companion, because they work in twos, don't they? I met with them in Banja Lucic Square in Zagreb, which is the center of Zagreb. Here is some footage of where we met, because we arranged to meet next to the statue. So I turned up at the statue, and they had arranged to meet with me at 5:30 in the afternoon, which happened to be an hour before the football. And I kind of took that to mean that I was sort of being vetted. So I took that to mean that this was kind of like an audition, and I needed to basically say all the right things if they were going to let me play football with them. That's kind of how I felt. But I also had this intention of genuinely using our conversation for observational purposes for this channel. So we met at the statue, and then we had to find somewhere to sit down, and there was a fast food restaurant not too far away, actually, on the square. So we went there. I found it interesting because obviously Mormon missionaries can't drink coffee, can they? And I think alcohol? I'm pretty sure they can't drink alcohol either. So they'd picked somewhere where they obviously serve soft drinks, which is fine. So we went in there and I ordered some onion rings and a Coke. And obviously I sat down thinking, oh gosh, they're not going to order a Coke, are they? And sure enough, when they got to the table, they were both carrying orange juice. Again, these are very small details, but I think it's interesting that they were basically living up to all of my expectations, every single one of my expectations, including the way they were dressed. Because when they first approached me in the square, they were just unmistakable. Even before I could recognize their faces or the face of Betty from Facebook, it was unmistakable that these were Mormon missionaries, not just the badge cards, which said sister so-and-so, sister so-and-so, but also really, really long skirts. And I'm going to say that, and I have nothing against really, really long skirts, by the way. It's just that, without wanting to be too unkind, they were dressed in a very frumpy way, in a way that made them stand out for kind of all the wrong reasons. There wasn't really anything stylish about their appearance. And I find that interesting coming from a Jehovah's Witness background, because we were always taught to think that we needed to dress smartly in suits, preferably for men, and ties. And, for women, they had to dress smartly too when preaching or at the Kingdom Hall, so as to not detract from our message, to present a more business-like appearance. And it just made me think, the way you're dressed is detracting from your message, because I'm not looking at two women thinking, wow, these women are have it together and they're professional. I was looking at two people who were quite obviously dressed in a way that was almost certainly not decided authentically by themselves, but was more or less imposed on them. So that's what I have to say about how they were dressed. So we had this sit down in the restaurant, in the fast food place, and I was expecting Betty to sort of take the lead, because it was Betty who I'd reached out to on Facebook to start the whole thing going. But actually it was Harriet, again, not her real name, who really seemed to do most of the talking. And that, in my mind, established that there was a hierarchy. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I immediately thought, okay, so Harriet's the one who is sort of in charge of this pair of missionaries. And it was interesting that Harriet said that she had, and I'm going to try not to give too much identifying information, Harriet had been assigned to Ukraine, but due to the war in Ukraine, had been reassigned ultimately to Croatia, but had been to two different countries, or had been reassigned, to two different countries before finally being assigned to Croatia and arriving in Zagreb, which is where our meeting was taking place. To which I replied, oh, well, presumably the church just covered all the travel costs for you, because we're talking kind of multiple cities and multiple destinations and what have you. And she said, no, I paid for it myself. And then I remembered, of course, this is a 2-year stint, missionary stint, that the Mormon missionaries have to pay for themselves. And actually, Betty and Harriet clarified that for women missionaries, it's a year and a half. So it's not the full 2 years. So there's an interesting difference there between male and female missionaries. Anyway, the actual conversation itself was quite interesting, because normally if I'm having a conversation along religious lines, I'm doing it in the context of maybe an interview on this channel, or maybe I'm doing a call-in show where people are coming at me with their arguments for God, and I'm giving my immediate rebuttal to those arguments, or explaining how I feel about them. But this was different. I wasn't interested in changing their minds per se, because I knew how difficult that would be as more or less a total stranger. I was there to observe. I was there to let them express themselves. And if they wanted me to comment or give my reaction, then I would give my reaction. And that's how I played it. And they expressed, basically, it was almost like they were going off pat. They were saying, giving their testimony kind of thing, and explaining what their beliefs were. And you could kind of tell that it was almost rehearsed. It was almost something that they were doing, like, with everybody on an almost daily basis. And they gave me the Book of Mormon. Here is my copy. And I was actually quite pleased about this, because one thing I do not have, despite having an extensive collection of Jehovah's Witness materials, no one's ever given me a Book of Mormon so far. And here is mine now, thanks to our meeting. And they took me to Moroni. They did kind of test the waters a little bit to see how much I knew about Mormons, and I would give kind of fairly vague answers and say, yes, well, I know this and I know that. They took me to Moroni, or Harriet, I should say, took me to the final Book of Mormon, which is the Book of Moroni. And she read to me, actually, no, she didn't read to me. She took me to Moroni chapter 10, verses 3 to 5, or was it 2 to 5? I'm going to say 2 to 5. And she asked me to read the verses. And I found that really interesting, because Jehovah's Witnesses do the same thing. In other words, they're not going to, if they're going to you with their book, Enjoy Life Forever, this is how Jehovah's Witnesses study. They have their study publication. So when going through the Enjoy Life Forever book, it's not enough to just simply open up the page and read to the person that you're studying with. You want them to feel involved. You want them to be engaged in the process. And psychologically, there is value to this, because if someone feels as though they're just having information hurled at them, then they're going to be a bit more distanced from it. But if they are involved in the information, or even helping to disseminate the information themselves, psychologically, they're already kind of part of the whole process. They're already a cog in the machinery. So Harriet asked me to read, and I'll read the verses again. and seal up these records after I have spoken a few words by way of exhortation unto you. Behold, I would exhort you that when ye shall read these things, if it be wisdom in God that ye should read them, that ye would remember how merciful the Lord hath been unto the children of men, from the creation of Adam even down until the time that ye shall receive these things and ponder it in your hearts. And when ye shall receive these things, I would exhort you that ye would ask God the eternal Father in the name of Christ, if these things are not true, and if ye shall ask with a sincere heart, with real intent, having faith in Christ, he will manifest the truth of it unto you by the power of the Holy Ghost, and by the power of the Holy Ghost ye may know the truth of all things. So they got me to read this, and then they asked me how I felt about it. And I said, interesting sort of thing. And they said that this was, for them, kind of like a revelatory thing, because both, and I found this interesting, both Betty and Harriet indicated that in their younger years they had been through periods of doubt. Both had been raised in the LDS church. Both had had periods of doubt when they were younger. But both had resolved these doubts by, in their words, doing research and specifically dwelling, in the case of Harriet, I think, on these verses. And Harriet expressed that, because I pressed her on what she meant by, I had it proven to me. And I said, well, can you please explain how it was proven to you? Presumably you didn't get a letter or a phone call or anything. And she said, well, no, it was more of like an emotional feeling that I got. To which I replied, well, I guess the problem I have as someone who used to be religious and is no longer religious is that when I look around all of the world's religions, I'm not seeing too many intellectual reasons for belief. In other words, when most people are talking about their reasons for believing, I'm overwhelmingly seeing emotional reasons and feelings being cited as a reason for being in a particular belief system. So different feelings, it seems, in different individuals can lead people to different faiths. And that tells me that feelings alone and emotions alone are not a reliable compass when it comes to determining whether things are true or not. I didn't put it exactly like that, but that was roughly how I put it. And I forget what Harriet said in response. It felt like there had to be a response, and a lot of it was praise. There was lots of praise lavished on me. Oh yeah, I really appreciate that you're coming at it from that angle and you're wanting answers. That was what they said. We really respect that you're trying to find answers, I said a few things along those lines, but again, I was trying to rein myself in a little bit. I was trying to avoid the temptation to kind of fire at them everything I know about the LDS Church, which isn't a great deal, but I do know, for example, about the Nephilim, and how they were the Nephites, and how they were quote unquote cursed by God, by God giving them dark skin. So I know that's in the Book of Mormon. I have yet to find the exact verse, which I'll come to. And I also find it incredibly dodgy that, well, the whole story of the golden plates is dodgy, isn't it? Quite frankly. I found some golden plates, and they just so happen to be a sequel to the Bible. And and I was able to translate them because they were in a mystical language using a magic stone. But then I lost the plates. Then the plates vanished, and so no one can verify my story. But trust me, the plates with that, all of that is incredibly sketchy. And I also think it's a valid criticism, those who say, you know, you look at the way the Book of Mormon is written. It's written in language that is mimicking the King James Version, which is a 16th century text. So even in just that brief portion that I was asked to read, you have words like ye and hath, which people were not using in 19th century America. No one was walking around. I haven't seen any cowboy films where people are walking around and in everyday language saying words like ye and hath. So if it's a translation into English, why isn't it 19th century English? Why is it 15th or 16th century English? It seems that that alone is a heavy indication that we're talking about just someone off the top of their heads trying to mimic, make a story that's mimicking how the Bible would sound. Anyway, so I have all of these issues with the LDS Church already, and I'm not really raising them with these two sweet ladies who I'm meeting with. But we do agree that I'm going to study with them again. So having reached that agreement, it seemed I kind of overtly said, so is there going to be any football? And they said, yes, actually, we'd better go now. So then they needed to find somewhere to get changed, which was quite funny. So they had to get out of their frumpy attire and into their sports gear, which they did in the public toilets in Zagreb, which I can't imagine would have been very pleasant. But anyway, so I waited for them outside. We went to the place where the football was, and there were quite a few Mormons there. And it was quite funny because nearly all of them were wearing their badge cards on their T-shirts that they were going to be playing football with. And they were all referring to each other as brother-sister. So I'd already noticed that Betty and Harriet weren't calling each other by their first names. They were referring to each other as sister so-and-so or sister so-and-so using their last names. They carried on doing that for football, which I found just hilarious. And it was a kind of a 50-50 mix between men and women. And yeah, we played football, and I was seriously out of shape and kind of irritated with how out of shape I was, but still managed to score a few goals, thankfully. But it was just an interesting experience because I was just immediately embraced into this group. So everyone was coming up and saying hello and asking where I was from and what's your name. And at the end of the game, someone even said, good game, brother, or something like that. So I got called brother. And it made me think, this would work. This kind of thing that they're doing here and advertising in the expats group, this would work in many cases where someone's really struggling to integrate and they just want a friendly community to just kind of latch onto. And there was a lot of love bombing, and it was quite triggering, but also very fascinating. And I also found it fascinating that obviously they were Americans, although there were one or two native Croatians there. And every American that I went up to and said, whereabouts in America are you from? Every single one of them said Utah. So that immediately tells me we're not even talking about an American religion here. We're talking about a Utah religion. If practically everyone that they've sent over is from the same state in America. So yeah, there's more I could say really. I've already said more about this first encounter than I planned on saying. But the purpose of this video is to document my experience studying with the Mormons. I'm not sure whether I'm going to be able to play football with them again because it's kind of awkward with my schedule. But I will certainly try meeting with them again. And to that end, interestingly, they sent me this form, which we'll show on the screen. They said, hey, Lloyd, we wanted to send you this document that basically says that we will have your contact information in our phone. It's just for the EU privacy laws, no worries. So it's GDPR compliant. Also, could we meet with you on Wednesday this week? So that was the message they sent along with this form, which, as you can see, says Supplemental Privacy Notice, European Economic Area, Missionary Activity, and a whole list there of information about how my data is going to be used. And I replied and just said, yeah, no problem at all with the privacy. I'm not going to be able to meet with you this Wednesday, but I would hopefully be able to meet with you the week after. So I don't know actually when you're going to be watching this. I'm assuming it's going to be maybe weeks or potentially even months in the future, depending on how long my study goes on for, or how long it takes before they how long it takes before the cognitive dissonance really becomes too overwhelming for them. I like to think that in the conversation I had with these two ladies, I've given them some food for thought. I've sown some seeds. And especially when talking about my experience as a Jehovah's Witness, because I even mentioned, the shunning and the way they dissuade apostate material and that kind of thing. So presumably that will have been interesting for them. Hopefully it will have made them make a few internal kind of mental connections. And yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how long I can keep this up for. I'm determined not to have either of them on camera, or indeed anyone on camera in connection with this, unless they agree to. Who knows, maybe later in this video they will agree to it. I'm assuming they won't. So in the next chapter of this video, we'll find out what happens next. Next time on Lloyd Meets the Mormons. In their minds, they are engaging me in a study. In my mind, I am trying to sow some seeds. We had our meeting and it began with some small talk. It was a bit weird though when they asked me how my kids are. And then we got down to brass tacks. The study started. I decided on a strategy of giving them a positive verse from the Book of Mormon and a negative verse. Both were clearly unsettled by the verse. Both clearly found the verse problematic and difficult to explain. When speaking specifically about these words, which are so clearly racist, I moved backwards when I heard the word beautiful used to describe what I've just read.